After decades of fighting, the environmental movements have finally achieved the position they have been craving for so long. Today, they are one of the most powerful forces in politics. But most of these activists don't really know who they are actually fighting for, who is truly responsible for setting their agenda. It's definitely not Greta.
How dare you!
The history of climate is shown through energy, so not surprisingly, big oil has always played a significant role, but maybe not in the way you expect. When the movements were in their infancy, a new energy source was emerging. It had the potential of being much cheaper and more efficient than oil, and that thought terrified them. But fighting it themselves was not an option. They lacked any credibility, so they managed to turn what should be their main adversary, the climate movements, into their biggest ally. You could say they managed to turn them into useful idiots. And it all started in 1956. A man by the name of Robert Orwell Anderson is in Saudi Arabia. He is on a secret trip to visit the king. His mission? Get the Sauds to rein in Nasser, the dictator in Egypt, for this is the time of the Suez Crisis. Egypt was taking control of the canal, putting the US and UK's oil holdings in the Middle East into peril. This could collapse the British Empire and disturb the balance of power in Europe. Anderson threatened the Saudi king with a new technology, nuclear power. At the time, still a mostly US-only technology, not in commercial use yet. Anderson was dismissed out of hand. After all, he had no actual interest in rendering petroleum worthless, and they all knew it, for Anderson was an oil baron himself. 1969. David Bauer leaves the Sierra Club, a leading environmentalist, but also staunchly anti-nuclear. The club had voted 9-1 for supporting nuclear power in California, the alternative being transforming rivers and lakes by needing to install hydroelectric power. David Bauer went on to found Friends of the Earth, an anti-nuclear environmentalist group. The founding $500,000 donation came from the oil baron, Robert Orwell Anderson. But the oil and gas industry's influence on the climate movement does not stop with David Bauer. The Sierra Club eventually became an anti-nuclear group. They have taken $136 million from fossil fuel interests. Richard Leonard, former Sierra Club president. I think playing dirty is okay, as long as you have noble goals. National Resources Defense Council, they have $70 million of investment into natural gas companies, currently trying to close California's final nuclear plant. Wise International, funded by natural gas and renewable energy companies. Citizens Against Nuclear Bailouts, fought against nuclear in Pennsylvania, does not disclose donors. Ohioans Against Corporate Bailouts, fought against nuclear in Ohio, does not disclose donors. Greenpeace, the world's most influential environmental group, one of their big points, shutting down nuclear power globally, generates over $400 million annually, does not disclose donors. Big Oil's infiltration of these kinds of organizations were very successful, so successful that today most green political parties are anti-nuclear. Belgium's energy minister, a member of their Green Party, allegedly got her position thanks to Gazprom. Rashida Dati, a former EU commissar specializing in energy policy, allegedly got lobbied by Engie while she was in office. The Swedish Green Party was founded in 1981 in the wake of the anti-nuclear movement fueled by oil companies. The German Greens, founded in East Germany in 1980 by anti-nuclear groups, and they have both been quite successful. Germany is in the process of shutting down their final nuclear plants. Sweden have permanently shut down most of their reactors. The tide is finally turning, having become a big talking point in the election due to the energy crisis. It seems like it could make a comeback, which is a bit ironic. An oil shortage seems to be what finally clears the world stage for the energy source that the fossil fuel companies spent half a century fighting against. An energy source they clearly vehemently dislike. The reason for this hatred of nuclear is obvious. Just remember what Robert Anderson told the Sauds back in the 50s. It threatens the status of oil as the only reliable source of energy in the world. However, there is something weird going on. The last 2 decades we were sold on renewables like wind and solar being a replacement of fossil fuels as well. But the last few years oil companies have started advertising in favor of these renewable sources. Clearly they are not scared of them. Why is that? What nefarious scheme have they come up with? You may think solar and wind power is this new modern technology, but it actually predates oil and coal. It has been used for thousands of years. Wind power was used by the ancient Egyptians to propel their boats on the Nile. It was used to power water pumps and applied in windmills to assist in food production. Solar was used to light fires back in the 7th century BC. The Chinese used mirrors to light torches. The Romans used sunrooms to heat their bathhouses. But definitely, wind and solar for electricity has only existed a few decades. The modern solar panel was invented in 1954, and wind power plants only began being used in large scale in the 80s, after the oil shortage a decade before. See the parallel here? Already in the 70s, an oil shortage sparked the entry of a new source of energy, a source of energy big oil did not like. But even though oil and gas companies used to be against solar and wind, today they advertise for it. This might finally be real support, not the cloak and dagger strategy they have used to say they are for renewables in public, but secretly fund climate change deniers. The reason they actually support wind and solar this time is simple. The oil industry knows that renewables are inevitable. They have started positioning themselves to profit of it, particularly from natural gas, a necessary friend of wind and solar. The fundamental reason why is wind only generates electricity when it is windy, and solar only generates electricity when it is sunny. But in fact, peak electricity usage is after dark, which creates problems when it is not windy at night. The grid is not built to compensate for regional differences, and investments in the trillions would be required for a renewable grid. This leaves 2 options. First option, batteries, which have not nearly achieved true grid scale. Without a decrease in material prices, it might never. Cost would be way too massive. Second option, and the one that is currently used, is natural gas. A cleaner alternative than coal and oil for sure, but there are still significant greenhouse gases. It is already on the rise because it is less polluting than oil. In fact, it is one of the reasons why the carbon dioxide production in the developed world has decreased the last decades. As solar and wind take over from legacy coal and oil, the droughts in electricity generation need to be picked up by something. Because the environmental groups and the fossil fuel industry are allied against nuclear, that energy source is a no-go, leaving us one option: natural gas. More renewables would not decrease the usage of natural gas, it would increase it. It is the lifeline the oil and gas companies need. They will not be required to execute a difficult transition to a fossil-free world. They keep running business as usual. At least until battery technology and scale eventually develops, which might never end up happening. Of course, the alternative would be nuclear power, but with the 2 only powerful groups lobbying for energy policy, environmentalists and big oil, being against it, this seems quite unlikely. They have fought against it for generations, and it is a fight they seem to have won. Indeed, the energy industry made the one group you would expect to fight them an ally in the quest to protect their bottom line, and the environmentalist groups might not even realize they are being and have been played like a fiddle. Alright, that is the end of the video. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.